Detail just changed in 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death certificate. Her pregnancy status, 14 years old. You see, what was previously listed as N for pregnant is now marked U for unknown or undetermined.
Somebody quietly changed something on Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death certificate. Not the cause of death, not the manner of death, something else. Something that, once you see it, makes you sit back and ask a completely different set of questions about this entire case. The section that originally said she was not pregnant, that section was changed, amended. The coroner signed off on it, and now, instead of a clear answer, that box says unknown. She was 14 years old, and nobody has explained why that changed. Now, maybe it means nothing. Maybe it is just a paperwork correction in a complicated case involving a severely decomposed body. That is possible. But here is what is also possible. That a 14-year-old girl was carrying more than just secrets the night she got into that Uber, and that the man who sent that car for her had even more reason than we thought to make sure she never made it home. Let me tell you what we know. And let me tell you what nobody has answered yet. This is the story of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and this is the story of everything David Burke may have been trying to erase. Before any of this happened, David Anthony Burke was just a young man from Texas with a voice and a vision. He went by David, 21 years old by the time any of this came to light, a singer and songwriter who had moved to Los Angeles and started climbing fast. His music landed him a Fortnite deal. His song became the game's first official theme in 2025. He had product endorsements. He had a debut album ready to go. He had management, a team, money, moving in the right direction. On the outside, this was a young man who had figured it out early. And then there was Celeste. Celeste Rivas Hernandez lived in Lake Elsinore, out in Riverside County, about 80 miles from Hollywood. She was 14 years old. She loved to sing and dance. Friday nights in her house were movie nights. She first crossed paths with David Burke in January of 2022. She was 11 years old. He was 18. Let me be very clear about those numbers, 11 and 18. There are no details in the court documents about exactly how they met or what that first encounter looked like. But investigators say that over the months and years that followed, a relationship developed between them that was never appropriate, never legal, and, according to the prosecution, ultimately deadly. Moving on, because what happens next is where this story starts to show its teeth. In February of 2024, Celeste's family reported her missing to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. When investigators went through her phone records, David's number was right there, so they called him. He told them the last time he spoke to Celeste was around February 13th or 14th. He said he did not know she was a minor. He said he had no idea she was missing. Oh, so now you don't know her. Because when LAPD deputies showed up at his door that same night for a welfare check, David Burke opened the door and, during that conversation, showed them a yearbook photo of Celeste that he had saved on his cell phone. A junior high school yearbook photo. Make it make sense. You are telling law enforcement you barely know this girl. You did not know she was young. You had no idea. And then you pull out her school photo that you saved on your personal phone. He told deputies he had only met her once, back in November 2023. They made note of what they saw and left. 2 days later, Celeste came home on her own. After Celeste came home, her parents took her phone away. They were done with whatever was happening, so David Burke drove to Lake Elsinore. Not to speak with law enforcement, not to step back from a situation that had already drawn police attention. He drove to her school, found a student in Celeste's junior high class, and paid that student $1,000 cash to hand Celeste a phone he had purchased, so the two of them could keep communicating without her parents knowing a single thing about it. But here is what the text messages do tell us, because prosecutors say those messages are some of the most important evidence in this entire case. Throughout their time together, Celeste and David were discussing things that no adult should ever be putting on a child. The messages touched on deeply personal consequences that follow a physical relationship between two people, things a 14-year-old girl should never have been navigating alone. And all of it was sitting in David's iCloud, documented, recoverable, and now in the hands of prosecutors. In November of 2024, they reportedly broke up, except the messages after that suggest they kept talking, kept seeing each other. The dynamic did not actually end. And by March of 2025, Celeste was messaging David telling him she wanted more out of her life than what he was giving her, that she deserved better than what they had, a 14-year-old girl, telling a grown man she deserved more. And he kept her right where she was. Then April came. And with April came a fight that prosecutors say changed everything. On the night of April 22, 2025, Celeste and David went back and forth over text. She had found out he was involved with other women. She was done being strung along. And in those messages, she told him she was going to expose him. She was going to take everything she knew about their relationship and destroy his life with it. Now, here is where you have to understand the full weight of what she was threatening. David's debut album was dropping in 2 days, April 25th, 2025. He had an album release party already planned for the following night. He had an international tour locked in. He had Fortnite money. He had endorsements. He had a multi-million-dollar career sitting right on the edge of becoming something massive. And Celeste had those messages. She had years of history. She had everything she needed to bring it all down. But here is the question that the death certificate change forces us to ask now. Was that all she had? Because those messages between them touched on things far beyond just their relationship, deeply personal things, the kind of things that, if made public, go way beyond a career-ending scandal. And now the section of her death certificate that was supposed to give us a clear answer about her condition when she died. That section no longer gives a clear answer at all. If Celeste was carrying more than just secrets the night she got into that Uber, if David believed she was, that is a completely different level of desperation than anything a music career alone could explain. The coroner's office amended that certificate after the contents of those messages came to light. A forensic death investigator who reviewed the amendment noted physical state of Celeste's remains.
LA Times, the 2023 Tesla registered to singer David was ticketed 11 days before Celeste Rivas' decomposing body was found. On August 27th, a parking enforcement officer marked the Tesla, noting the position of the tires in the Hollywood Hills neighborhood where that singer lived. Then on September 3rd, the officer issued a citation to the Tesla for violating the 72-hour parking ordinance. 2 days after that, the Tesla was towed to this tow yard in Hollywood, and then 3 days after, on September 8th, a tow yard worker caught something neighbors we spoke to also mentioned, that foul smell coming from the car. That same day is when investigators found the 15-year-old's body. Investigators are carefully combing through evidence.
April 23, 2025, David Burke sent Celeste an Uber. At 8:40 that evening, that car left Hollywood Hills heading to Lake Elsinore. Over 80 miles, to pick up a 14-year-old girl who had just threatened to take his whole world apart. She messaged him the entire ride. The car dropped her off at his home at 10:10 that night, and after that, Celeste Rivas Hernandez never sent another message to anyone. 10:10 at night. The car pulls away. Celeste is at the door. She'd been talking to David the entire ride. Whatever they said to each other in those messages during that 80-mile drive, she still came. She walked up to that house in the Hollywood Hills. She went inside. 20 minutes later, according to prosecutors, she was gone. Not missing, not somewhere else, gone, dead, inside that house. The autopsy, once it was finally unsealed after 7 months under a court order, confirmed what happened to Celeste. Multiple stab wounds, at least 2 penetrating injuries to her chest and torso. One of them went through her liver. There was no 911 call. There was no attempt to get her help. There was no moment where David Burke picked up a phone and tried to save her life. According to the prosecution, he waited. He stood in that house and he waited until she was no longer a threat to anything. And then, at approximately 10:30 that same night, 20 minutes after she arrived, David picked up his phone and sent text messages to Celeste's number asking where she was. "Oh, so now you're looking for her. Let me tell you something. Prosecutors are not treating those texts as panic. They are not treating them as confusion. They are treating them as step 1 of a plan that David Burke had already thought through before she ever got in that car. He was creating a paper trail, a digital record of a man who had no idea what happened to the girl he was texting, a record he could point to later and say, 'See, I was looking for her, too.' By 11:30 that same night, he was already in his Tesla heading north on the 101 freeway, up to San Marcos Pass Road, State Route 154, near Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara County. Remote, isolated. He went there to get rid of her belongings and destroy whatever evidence he could reach that night. Then he turned around. He was home by early morning on April 24th. That same morning, he went to a radio interview for his album. Moving on, because the days that followed are where you really start to understand what kind of thinking was happening inside that house. Celeste was there. Her body was in that property, and David Burke moved forward with his life like a man with somewhere to be. On April 24th, the day after she died, he ordered a shovel from Home Depot through Postmates, had it delivered directly to his door. He also sent 2 more text messages to Celeste's phone that day. She did not respond. She could not respond. And after April 26th, he never reached out to her number again. Not one more message, not one more call. After 3 days, the search for Celeste Rivas Hernandez, from his end, was completely over. Think about that from any angle you want. If you genuinely did not know what happened to someone you had been involved with for years, someone you had taken to London, someone you had introduced to your family, would 3 days be enough? Would you not be worried? Would you not be reaching out to people who knew her, asking questions, trying to figure out where she went? But hey, David Burke had already moved to the next problem. On May 1st, 2025, 8 days after Celeste died, 2 chainsaws were delivered to his Hollywood Hills address, ordered on Amazon, not under his name, under the name Victoria Mendes, a name that does not connect to any real person in this case. On May 5th, more packages arrived at the same address, under the same fake name, a body bag, heavy-duty laundry bags, a blue inflatable pool. So what? A chainsaw, a body bag, a pool. All ordered within days of a 14-year-old girl going missing. all delivered to the home where she was last seen alive, all under a name that is not his. Prosecutors say David placed Celeste's body into that inflatable pool inside his garage, using it to keep the evidence contained while he used those tools to take her apart, piece by piece. And the reason they are so specific about that detail is because of what forensic analysts found when they eventually got into that garage. Tiny blue plastic fragments embedded in Celeste's remains. Fragments that the LAPD's Forensic Science Division Trace Analysis Unit physically matched back to that exact pool. And because Celeste had a tattoo of David's name on her left ring finger, prosecutors say he cut that finger off. He removed the pinky finger on the same hand as well. Those two fingers have never been found. He then placed what remained of her upper body into the cadaver bag. The rest went into a garbage bag beneath it. He loaded both into the front trunk of his Tesla, and he left her there for weeks, possibly months. The car sat. People around him noticed the smell coming from the property, from the vehicle. And according to prosecutors, David had an explanation ready every single time. He told friends, people close to him, business associates. Whatever story kept them from asking the next question. There is video footage from July of 2025 that reportedly shows David and a close friend of his named Neil Langston at that Hollywood Hills property. In that footage, David appears to be explaining the bad smell coming from somewhere nearby.
See? Oh, yes, I apologize in advance for the way my bathroom smelled. I took a shit in there like 2 hours ago.
I don't care, I just took a shit in.
Another one? Type shit. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Yep. I had to go.
Look at my wall.
On May 8th, he drove back to that spot in Santa Barbara County, the same isolated area he had gone to the night Celeste died. He went back again on May 31st. Investigators later confirmed that Celeste's identification was found at that location in January of 2026. He was also at that site a third time. On July 7th, a burn cage was delivered to his home, same fake name. Prosecutors say the plan was to incinerate whatever physical evidence remained. On July 29th, surveillance footage captured David driving that Tesla for the last confirmed time before he left Los Angeles on his international concert tour. He went on tour with Celeste in the front trunk of a parked car 400 feet from where he'd been living. Anyways, the car sat on that street. The days kept passing. September 8th, 2025. A tow yard manager in Hollywood noticed something wrong with a Tesla that had come in. Flies around the vehicle, a smell that answered every question before anyone said a word. LAPD responded. They opened the front storage compartment, inside a black cadaver bag covered in insects, severely decomposed remains, a head and torso. A garbage bag beneath it held the rest. The ring finger and pinky finger on her left hand were not there. The car was registered to David Anthony Burke. On September 16th, dental records confirmed what investigators already suspected. The remains belonged to Celeste Rivas Hernandez, 14 years old, missing since April, found in September, in pieces. And here is where this investigation gets layered in a way that most cases do not. Because from the moment that identification came back, investigators were not starting from scratch. They already had a thread. They had the February 2024 call to David from Riverside County. They had the welfare check at his door. They had a girl who had been reported missing twice, February and April of 2024, and whose phone records kept pointing back to the same number. So they pulled, and they kept pulling. 54 search warrants were executed in this case. 54, covering David's iPhone, his iCloud accounts, his Tesla's internal data system, cloud storage across multiple platforms, social media accounts, accounts belonging to people in his circle, his management, and investigators were still running warrants after his arrest in April of 2026, still pulling data after he was already in a cell. From one iCloud account, they recovered between 8 and 10 terabytes of data. By the time this video was recorded, investigators had reviewed 1 terabyte. 7 or more still waiting. And what they found in that first terabyte was already enough to add a charge of continuous sexual abuse of a child to the murder case against him. But here is the part of the investigation that keeps sitting with me, and it connects directly back to that death certificate change. When the autopsy was finally released, after 7 months under seal, forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan reviewed it publicly. And he noted something important. When medical examiners perform an autopsy on a female, they examine the reproductive system. They look for physical signs consistent with pregnancy. And in Celeste's autopsy report, the section covering her reproductive system noted no abnormalities, no visible physical indicators of pregnancy. But her body had been decomposing inside a car trunk for months in the California heat before it was ever found. And the key hormone that would confirm a pregnancy, HCG, does not survive that level of decomposition. You cannot test for it. You cannot find it. The physical evidence that would tell you definitively one way or the other was simply gone. So the coroner could not confirm it. But they also could not. And then the text messages came. When prosecutors revealed that Celeste and David's messages referenced pregnancy, abortion, and Plan B, the coroner went back to that death certificate, and they changed the pregnancy status from not pregnant to unknown. That is not a small change. That is a coroner saying, based on new information coming in from the investigation, we can no longer stand behind our original answer. Make it make sense. Because here is the question legal analysts have been asking since that amendment came out. If prosecutors had solid, confirmable evidence that Celeste was pregnant when she died, why is pregnancy not listed as part of the motive? If she was carrying his child and he knew it, that is arguably the most powerful motive of all. The fact that prosecutors did not include it suggests they are not confident enough to stand behind it in a courtroom. But they did not unamend the death certificate either. So what is sitting in the middle of this case is a question that may never get a clean answer. And that question is this. Was Celeste Rivas Hernandez pregnant when David Burke sent that Uber to bring her to his house? We do not know. The coroner does not know, and the body cannot tell us anymore. But somebody said something at some point, because coroners do not amend death certificates based on nothing. According to the forensic expert who reviewed this, someone in that circle may have shared information even informally, suggesting Celeste had been pregnant, and that was enough to make the coroner go back and change that box from a clear answer to no answer at all. Now here is something else the investigation uncovered that almost nobody is talking about enough. The prosecution's brief states, as fact, that David stabbed Celeste and stood there watching her as she lost consciousness. That is in the legal document. That is the prosecution putting that detail on paper and signing their name to it. Forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan flagged this directly. His point was this: forensics can tell you how someone died. Phone data can tell you when activity stopped, But the statement that a specific person stood in a specific room and watched a specific thing happen, that kind of detail does not come from a lab. It comes from a witness, and he said it plainly. To say someone stands there and watches an individual bleed out, that comes from a witness. So now there is another question sitting on top of all the others. Is there a witness? Someone who was in that house, or who David told what happened afterward, someone whose account gave prosecutors enough to write that specific detail into their legal brief? Nobody has confirmed who that witness might be. But there is one name that has been sitting at the center of speculation since the beginning: Neil Langston. Neil was reportedly one of David's close friends. When investigators started building this case, Neil Langston reportedly refused to cooperate. He did not show up to testify when called. So law enforcement tracked him down to his mother's house in Montana and arrested him on a Los Angeles warrant for failure to appear as a witness. He was brought back to L.A. He reportedly appeared in front of the grand jury for approximately 30 to 40 minutes. That is an extremely short time for someone who had to be arrested in another state just to get him into that room. People who have nothing to say do not need warrants served at their mother's house. And people who cooperate fully do not usually spend less than an hour in front of a grand jury. After it was all over, Neil went on Instagram. He posted that he was legally fine in every way. He said he had all his receipts. He said people he trusted had thrown his side of the story out the window the moment his name appeared next to David's in the news. And he said the thing he was arrested for was never even formally charged. The warrant was retracted. So now, he has not been charged with anything. He has not been officially connected to the crime. But he has also not fully explained what he knows, what he saw, or what David said to him during the months that Celeste was in that car. And investigators have not closed the door on whether anyone else will face charges in connection with this case. After the body was identified, after the car was traced back to David, David transferred the deeds of 2 Texas homes into a trust in his mother's name. The assistant district attorney in Texas put it simply in court. A car with a body in it was registered to their home address in Houston. That is reason enough to be questioned by authorities. Whether his family knew anything, whether they saw anything during that trip to Texas in 2024 when David brought Celeste to meet them. Whether any of them will take the stand and what they will say if they do. Those are questions this case has not answered yet. What investigators do have is a physical evidence trail that is extraordinarily difficult to argue against. Celeste's DNA in the garage, the plastic fragments matching the pool, the Amazon purchase history, the Uber records, the Tesla data, the cell phone timeline, 54 search warrants worth of digital evidence still being processed. A full year after Celeste took that ride, LAPD moved on David Burke's location and placed him under arrest. He was charged with first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and unlawful mutilation of human remains. He pleaded not guilty to all of it, and the preliminary hearing is coming. Celeste Rivas Hernandez deserved to just be a teenager. She deserved Friday movie nights and growing up and figuring out who she was going to be. She deserved every ordinary thing. And the least we can do now is say her name like it matters. Because it does. Rest, Celeste. There are still questions in this case that do not have answers yet. Was she pregnant? Who is the witness that gave prosecutors enough to put that specific detail in a legal brief? What is on the rest of that iCloud data? What did the people around David actually know, and when did they know it? Those questions are going to get answered in a courtroom. And when they do, Crime Lytics is going to be right here breaking it down for you. Because that is what we do on this channel. We do not just cover the headlines. We go into the parts of the story that make you stop and think, the parts that make you ask questions, the parts that do not wrap up clean. If this is your first time here, welcome. Hit subscribe. We cover domestic violence, murder, and the crimes that happen between people who were supposed to care about each other, and we do not look away. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you think about the pregnancy question. Tell us what you think about Neil Langston. Tell us what angle you are watching this case from. Because I said what I said. This story is not over yet. Justice for Celeste.